being raised in an entrepreneurial family, my muscle memory or my DNA or genetics or my posture became business later in life. So across the management consulting practice that we ran, we ran it with those lenses. We ran it from that cubicle or from that kind of a vantage point. Fast forward later, we get a knock on our door from one of my ex-colleagues from Deloitte. And within that environment, they're telling us that, listen, Shadrach, Pretty, we know you are running this growth agency, this 10xing business, but we have fallen on hard times and we are now backroom dwellers. We live in the backyard of nowhere. We are selling human hair extensions out of a handbag. Can you do something? So obviously, my first reflexes was, oh, no. We have never worked in the informal sector in a while. I haven't touched the informal sector since the days of being an outsourced partner to my mom back in my humble days. So I'm not going back there. I'm basically heading in a different direction. But of course, thank God for the gentleness of a good wife. She submitted a request on their behalf, even though they were my ex-colleagues. She asked that, listen, hubby, you need to not be a director for today. Be that husband who can hear the request of my heart. I went like, okay, I will look at this thing. So when we looked at it, long story short, we evolved them out of trading hair extensions out of a handbag. Within 36 months, we 10x them, more than 10x them, into a revenue position where they moved from $500 in their handbag to actually being a $2 million entity within 36 months. 4 bricks and mortar branches. We set up 2 of them inside 5-star hotels. They were now hiring 40 staff, and their square meter revenue was taller than even the largest retail JSE listed company. I think what I can say is one thing. Most people, they say Africa is rich in minerals, but Africa is poor in dollar value. And I think despite the poverty of Africa on monetizing minerals and other resources, I think the biggest deficit or the biggest poverty in Africa is the lack of leaders. And what am I talking about when I say leaders? I'm not speaking politically, I'm not speaking business-wise. You know, if we are able to lead ourselves with better decision making, with sober mindedness. So what am I going to tell your audiences? Do not leave work because your friends said that you are the mega star in that industry. Do not leave work because people said you do this so better that you must actually be on your own. Do not listen to your ego. Don't listen to your friends. When it boils down to making a decision, especially for a young family man, I'm addressing that group for now, or even a young married woman, before you take the plunge, take some stock, take some sober decision making. Leadership boils down to clarity of decisions, clarity of facts, and clarity of intuitively now making the leap in a very calculated but intuitive manner. Approach a business, approach that decision the same way that investors will approach a due diligence. Should we invest in this company or not? So you decide through the lenses of an investor. Put your family first. I cannot emphasize that enough. Do not jump the gun. Figure out yourself. How much runaway do you have? Do you have enough salary to last you 18 months? Those are key decisions. If you don't realize cash flow, if you don't unlock revenue, how further down can you go? What should you do without? Those are very critical decisions. What I'll conclude with is, are you a fortune teller or are you a detective? Fortune tellers, they dream and they've got this fantasy perspective on the world. But detectives, they fold their arms and they drill down into the facts. When they look at the forensic feedback, they make a decision. What are these facts telling me? Not what my emotions. What are the facts telling me? Because thank you kindly for the great question. Our blockchain application or our blockchain vertical focus is in supply chains. So if you look at that as a departure point, you will see that there is such a strong alignment between supply chain configurations and neurons and arteries and veins and the transporting system. So what do you call it? The human being is the most sophisticated supply chain miracle.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
In this time that we have spoken so far with your audiences, do we know how many circles, how many times your blood has actually circulated from your toes back into being pumped in, repumped in your heart, all the circulations and all the connecting of dots, connecting of neurons in me to be able to respond to your deep, insightful questions? That's number one. Number two, there are three words that I will use: the discipline, the precision, and the responsibility of dealing with people's life is the weight on the shoulder of every neurosurgeon. The same weight is found on the shoulders of a blockchain baron of Africa, as you correctly put it. So those two, they shoulder the same weight: discipline, precision, and the responsibility of lives. Last but not least, both surgery and blockchain, they intersect at this epicenter of requiring both experts to be solutionists and to be solution driven, not problem focused, but solution oriented. I will lean forward to give audiences and yourself some value. I will use the three letters or the three F's: family, finances, and flight. Family, finances, and flight. What do I mean? Thank you kindly. I will begin with flight. I will begin with flight. You know, when you step into the shoes of business, or when you are considering the entrepreneurship route, we need more entrepreneurs. Don't get me wrong. And we need entrepreneurs to not be stuck with the paralysis of analysis. As much as I'm saying they must plan, they must not over plan. As much as I'm saying they must be bold, they mustn't be overly bold. There is a fair measure of intuition, boldness, and planning, where wisdom shakes hands with the current reality. So we need a balance of those. So I'm going to use flight. You must know, dear employee, soon to be an entrepreneur, you need to know that as you leave the safe comforts of corporate life or the safe comfort of being on a payroll, you are about to take a flight. And I need to mention some principles of aviation. Aviation operates on three simple principles. Aviation relies on speed, drag, and lift. In order to get a Boeing jet or an Airbus up in the air, speed, drag, and lift. What does that mean? You need to speed down the runaway. You need to reach for the landing gear and pull it, and you need to basically create drag and lift the nose of the airplane so that the air underneath, along with the speed and what's called aerodynamics, will begin to defy gravity. So you need to know you're not going into business. You're about to defy gravity. You've made money this way, and now you are taking off that way. So defy gravity carefully, decisively, intentionally, and then let grace follow your hard work. Let grace follow your hardcore decisions. But you need to think like a pilot. You are stepping into the cockpit, and the lives behind you, they're not passengers, they're your family. So be intentional and apply the aerodynamics rules in business to defy gravity. Surround yourself with the right people and take copious amounts of wisdom. And this is now a time to look at those that went ahead of you. This is a time to choose who's around you. Those are the principles of defying gravity in life, to move from one tax bracket to the next tax bracket. Thank you kindly. I will answer it. I will deconstruct your question, and I'll answer it in two folds. The first fold is how we are defying gravity, where we are moving out of our initial focus in here, and how we are 10xing into the other focus. That's number one. And the second pillar I will use to respond is where Africa's priorities are according to the free trade agreement and how we are solutioning right into the agreement. So our plans are hinged on Africa's biggest cry and deepest prayers. I will answer it in those two folds. So the first one is we began our early departure via 10x in that salon and realizing that there is huge demand in the market across a hair segment on the continent that is worth $7 billion a year that has got a compromise of 38% counterfeit. So our truth machine and our trust machine in blockchain is first and foremost being deployed there. However, we began opening up other parallel solutioning frameworks as we are approached by universities, approached by political elders and others that are championing the transformation of Africa. So we are now moving. We've got a strategy called Beyond Hair. Beyond Hair means we are evolving out of hair into food security, and we are evolving beyond food security into the Africa supply chains. That is the first pillar of my response to your great question. The second one, I would like to use some numbers. By 2030 to 2035, Africa hopes to have added $450 billion to the continent's intercontinental balance sheet. That is going to require some heavy lifting as we add Coronet to the supply chain digital infrastructure in order to really flush out whatever cholesterol in medical terms is in our supply chain veins. We need to flush them out to enable and mechanize and weaponize supply chains towards that transformation. African elders, they've done a brilliant job in bringing the free trade agreement live in 5 years, and they hope to lift 30 million out of poverty, 30 million people out of poverty by 2030 to 2035. We need to ensure that that poverty upliftment or defying gravity to lift that many passengers from the ground requires the transparency, the truth, and the traceability of blockchain to ensure that we referee the trade dynamics. That's where we are on the path of that vision. Last but not least, there's a lowering of 90% of border tariffs. We see it differently. We don't just need to lower the tariffs by 90%. We need to convert our border post into drive-thrus, and blockchain can enable that evolution. You know, I go back to my high school days. When I was in high school, there was a certain couple that did life and business together in front of my very eyes. They were not in business, they were teachers. So my high school educators, two of them, they are called the Nganga family. The husband was a maths teacher, and the wife was a science teacher in the same school. So I would move from one period in the class and leave science and go to maths. So I would leave the husband and go to the wife in that order. So it perplexed me when I was in school. I asked them, don't you get too much of each other? Why are you always they would even go as far as planning lunch dates together, meaning when they're not teaching, they'll be eating lunch together. I was perplexed. I went like, what is this? I asked them because they were my friends and mentors. So when they were mentoring me, I'll be mentored by the husband, I'll be mentored by the wife. I asked them in secret, listen, don't you maybe need a bit of space? And the intensity to which your gas sensors is picking up the gas or the chemistry between the two of you is not the same. The intensity with which husband and wife, man and woman are moving in the same direction in life is not the same. So to the level to which you're being in the cockpit dynamics, commandeering your lives forward, to the level to which the glue between you or the chemistry or the language on the home front and in the boardroom, to the language that is viable for you, then you can consider being in business together. However, I'm going to give a disclaimer. Even though I'm in business with my wife, she's my co-founder and she's my wife, I tend to switch between two heads very naturally. because I have to figure out certain decisions during the day. Do they require me to be the director or to be the blockchain baron of Africa? Or do I need to switch the head of a husband? Clarity between those. When it comes to matters of the business, I need to make decisions that are in the best interest of the business. When it comes to matters of the home, I need to make decisions that are in the best interest of the home. Convergence. Convergence means what we are at home is what we are in business. Our value core is the same. So by default, what's good for the business is good for us because we've got the same epicenter of values. We've got a crystallized vision. So which hat are you wearing? I'll give you an example. I watched a movie about Samson's life at some point, and one of the kings, one of the enemy kings was a bit rattled that Samson is instilling hope in his corner of the world. He was because that discipline required to know that when shareholder value must be delivered, not just me, but my wife as well, we've got to put on the heads of entrepreneurs and deliver shareholder value. And then at the same time, we've got to guard our home against unreasonable value expectations from shareholders. So we need to ensure that our two worlds are converged and we're moving in the right direction. Absolutely, absolutely. It all boils down to our intentionality, not so much towards building Coronet, the business, but it boils down to our intentionality to building the innovation ecosystem that actually gave birth to Coronet. So one needs to know that behind the scenes, there's an innovation ecosystem that began being discussed over dinner with some select members of IBM. And that dinner discussion evolved into curating an innovation ecosystem. That ecosystem was the cultivation ground for giving birth to the business. So I just need to put that in perspective because our vision was very easy. Our vision was to build not just a blockchain company, but to build a blockchain digital infrastructure that will be the answer to prayer for Africa's ecosystems in supply chain. That's number one. The ecosystem of innovation means that we went and got the tallest in the industry, 110-year-old tech giant that has been in the space, has got technology in their muscle memory, has navigated so many recessions and so many industrializations in the process. And of course, we also needed to bring on board supply chain participants. Some of them were 40 years in the industry of hair to start with. So we had to not just bring IBM, but bring supply chain ecosystem participants so that whatever we build and whatever emerges out of the workshop has got passengers on board already, has got a captive audience around it. And of course, we brought into the sector a hands-on industry whereby we are solutionists by trade and we are management consulting practitioners who know our way around Africa and we know our way around emerging markets. We knew our way around hair. So leveraging all that at a macro focus was very strategic for Coronet as it evolves out of conceptualization, innovation ecosystems into the road whereby it is now being that digital infrastructure that is shooting out the light. And the outcomes in the process was we got the innovation equation right. However, last but not least, we were able to lift as we rise and bring about not just a profitable enterprise, but one that has got social impact embedded into its value core. That is very much an interesting question. For the benefit of those in the room, I would like to encourage a certain bias, not towards the toolkit or the toolbox, but a certain bias towards focusing on the needs on the ground. What do I mean by that? Some people, they think that because they were retrenched during COVID, they need to look for another job. But nobody should be looking for another job. People must be looking for problems that they can bring solutions to, whether that comes in an employment capacity or it comes in a business capacity. And for those that are going into tech entrepreneurship, do not look for the type of technology. Even though I'm in blockchain and I'm commandeering the mass adoption on the continent, don't have a bias towards only picking up blockchain, even though we need more of you in this space. However, look at the problem on the ground and don't look at the toolbox, meaning, are you getting AI? Are you getting IoT, Internet of Things? Are you getting machine learning? Are you getting blockchain? Your toolbox matters lesser. What's more critical is on the ground. Even you were looking at cloud computing yesterday. Look on the needs on the ground. Those needs will inform what type of a spanner, whether a 13-inch or a 16-inch, you will reach for from your toolbox. And last but not least, you need to recalibrate your focus during COVID, as you consider any of these emerging technology costs. You need to realize that we are only now on the 2nd of March. We are only 43 Saturdays away from 1st of January 2022, meaning you don't have much time. You need to really accelerate your recalibration focus. We are only 461 Saturdays away from the 1st of Jan 2030. And last but not least, we are only 722 Saturdays away from 1st of Jan 2035. So the landscape is shifting. What are you doing? Bring your toolbox. Even if you've got one spanner, even if you know cloud computing or you know blockchain, come. We need you. We need you here, and we need you like yesterday. Thank you so much. Wow. When COVID-19 kicked in, when the COVID-19 stepped into the room, it means that fluff had to leave the room. There was no more fluff. There was no more nonsense. There was no more pretending. There was no more distractions. COVID is here. So we had to adjust our posture and make sure that we live a zero fluff lifestyle. It's either we are walking the journey with you or we're not. There's no gray area. It's either we are heading in that direction. There's no exploring 10 different directions. We had to reconsolidate our value core and our resource core. That's personal. We had to relook at our relationship capital. We had to look at our social capital and our identity capital. We made some tough decisions on that front in order to become COVID savvy and weather the storm. That's number one. Number two, on the business side, because our blockchain is addressing supply chain frameworks and problems, there was something called, when COVID kicked in around the world, there was something called, in the industry language, supply chain shocks. So supply chain shocks is when the lockdowns are kicking in and now goods are no longer moving at the speed or at the rate. That's a shock. I'll give you an example. Most of us are familiar with the BMW vehicle. What people may not know is that on the back end, BMW as a company had 12,000, before COVID, had 12,000 suppliers across the world moving in tandem in order to produce one vehicle. Those are 12,000 sources of raw materials, processed materials in order to produce one vehicle across 60 countries. It's all, late in the 90s, it was all about cost cutting, efficiency, and move everything to China, move everything to India, move everything here and there. But COVID enters the room, and suddenly what made sense in the cost-cutting era now made a nightmare in the COVID era, because your supply chains are configured across 60 countries, 12,000 players just to produce one car, and needless to say, everything grinded to a halt. That's one example. So in the hair sector, we saw the same. In the food sector, we saw the same. So all those converging magnanimous challenges meant that 2030 arrived in 2020. That's what it meant. And we had to adapt our adoption trajectory and bring it forward. And also we found, last but not least, we found that people were a lot more receptive, because it was no longer about egos. Oh yeah, blockchain, I don't know how I feel. It was about, you better sign that contract now, because you are in trouble. There is a mindset shift that is required across all ecosystems. A mindset shift that must come about even within the Swift ecosystem must come swiftly. That mindset, and there's a mindset There is a mindset giant leap that must happen across startups in technology and legacy companies that can now cause the fintech equation to balance. That mindset shift is this. We need to move away from silos whereby it's Swift that's going to be a solution to the world, or it's startups in fintech. What we need is a hybrid. We need Swift to lose what worked 5 decades ago, to lose the mindset of they were the kings on the block. They need to bring humility into the solutioning cockpit and realize that they have to change their attire for where they are going. On the other end, startups on the ground need to behave like M-Pesa. They must not wait for the blessings of legacy companies. Solutionists, they solution. They must go ahead and bring solutions, period. And the legacy companies, whether they are coming or not, regulators, whether they are coming or not, people need our solutions on the ground. So for Swift, I'm going to use a Formula One language. A Formula One race, when you are coming around a corner, when you are navigating a sharp bend, the entire world is navigating a sharp bend. The question becomes, will Swift negotiate this bend safely and allow itself to be disrupted and become the disruptor? Or will they be too slow like Nokia, who went down the pit? Will they be too slow like Kodak, who went down the pit? Or will they allow themselves to adapt and be humble to see how they can be a solution to the world? No more playing defender where you are a goalkeeper. You go like, I was always the big boss. No, the world doesn't need a big boss. The world needs people that are working together, whether they are data scientists and social engineers. So that's where we are. Swift, the world is never the same, so you need to adapt. I'm kidding. I'm joking. I'm joking. Okay. On a serious note, on a serious note and on a parting note, principles, and principles. None of us can ever be so tall than to be taller than gravity. None of us can be so tall than to obey the aerodynamics principles that are a recipe towards takeoff or towards success. Each and every one of us, whether you are in blockchain, whether you are in data science, whether you are in cloud computing or any corner of the world, or whether you're solving for remittances, whatever it is, each industry landscape has got its gravity points. Don't go in there whether those gravity points are regulations or maybe they are consumer adoptions or consumer distrust. Every landscape has got its gravity point. What we need to do is through obeying and leveraging principles in any sector in order to defy gravity. So do not place all the trust in how smart you are or how hard you work or how much you know about the industry. Nokia knew too much about the telecom sector, a giant, but they still failed to see that the turbulence was shifting, that the market share was being snatched from under their feet. So whether you're an individual or you're a legacy firm, principles, adapt or die. That's what you need to realize. So that's the first point. And my last point is, just like how success has got principles, failure has principles. I can give you a failure recipe. Make sure you surround yourself with losers and people that are lazy and people that are negative. I assure you, you can fail tomorrow. You don't need to try hard. Surround yourself with failures, surround yourself with losers and those that are negative and those that are lazy. That's a sure recipe for failure. So knowing that, you need to do the opposite. See where you are headed, find out what your success coordinates are, and prepare for takeoff and prepare to stay in the air. Principles. They trump anything you and I know. Of course, if you're coming into the blockchain landscape, realize that there has to be a very, very specific problem that you want to solution, whether it's remittances, whether it's how to use blockchain within the cryptocurrency space. locate the problem first. Because if you locate the problem, not the solution, if you locate the problem, then you have a captive audience. I'll give you an example. There's a young man I know in the US. He's a global speaker. He's traveling the world. But one day he was broke. And he was so broke that his child asked him in the morning that, Dad, what am I going to eat? He said something dishonest because he's a motivational speaker. He said something dishonest that he didn't mean to. He went like, don't worry, son. Dad is going to bring food. And his son, who was 2 years old, he pulled a chair and sat down. And then he waited in a dining manner. And he went like, what are you doing, son? He said, well, you said you're going to bring food, so I'll be waiting here. So you need your audiences or your customers to be waiting while you are cooking the meal of your solution. So locate the audience, locate the problem, and then go into the workshop and configure a solution.